here, Dligach, sorry for pronunciation, from Kyiv, still in the center of Kyiv, and teaches economics at the National University. What's the university again?
Taras Shevchenko University. It's a central university of Ukraine, the main one.
Okay, Taras Shevchenko, great. We are living right next to you. In fact, I'm a neighbor of yours, and actually, hopefully, the one that is just going to join us here too. The other guest is also a neighbor of ours. So, well, it's great to have you on the show, Andre, and your reputation precedes you. I know a lot of people who follow you and what you talk about in economics. And I wanted to really get to the bottom of, I think, a very important topic. Hi, Vasil. And the second guest we have is Vasil Tofan from Horizon Capital, who has invested in a number of companies across Ukraine. So I'm going to let both of you just introduce yourself, starting with Vasil. Welcome. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and your relationship to the economy in Ukraine.
Vasil?
Well, I can start with you, Andre, if you're ready, and then I'll have Vasil.
Yeah, I'm ready. Sure. So I'm a university professor, but first of all, I'm a strategist. I'm a developer and coordinator of developing of Ukrainian national economic strategy, which is actually the main strategy for country. But unfortunately, we should change a lot of things after this war. Also, I'm an owner of a big consulting company in Ukraine. We are strategic consultants and marketing consultants for Ukrainian and international enterprises here and outside of Ukraine. And also, I'm co-founder of the biggest business community in Ukraine, Board Business Community. It's more than 1,000 entrepreneurs.
Great. Well, it's great to have you on. And Vasil, I know you personally. It's great to see you online. Why don't you introduce yourself and what you do in Ukraine?
Yes, Sam, thank you for inviting. Andre, pleasure to be on the same panel. Just first, apologies for the late entry, the sound check. Do you guys hear me well?
Hear you great.
Excellent. Yeah, so I work for Horizon Capital, senior partner. Horizon Capital is one of the larger private equity investors in Ukraine. We have about 1.1 billion under management, US dollars. And given we are invested in over 20 companies, I think we represent quite well the pulse of the Ukrainian economy, though I have to say we do have a tilt towards tech investments and primarily exporting companies.
Right. Well, the question I want to pose for both of you here, and I'll let you start, Andre, is I want to start with the impact that the conflict is having on the Ukrainian economy first. And after we do that, I'll come back to both of you and talk about Russian economy, because ultimately war, from my study of history, is total, especially in this context. The economic underpinnings of both countries are massive. I mean, that's going to have a huge impact on the duration and ultimately the outcome of the war. And Andre, first, what is the current impact that you see on the Ukrainian economy, and what has surprised you about the way the economy has responded to the war?
First of all, your show, Borderlands show, when I actually named my first US-Ukraine company, the name of this company was Borderland, because my US partner translated Ukraine as borderland, as borderland country. But actually, Ukraine is a frontline country, or better to say, frontier country. Frontier means that we are on the middle between two worlds, one world, one civilization. ex-Soviet or Soviet style or Soviet economics style civilization and Western world. We are on this border, even in economy. This means that we are trying to become liberal country with liberal laws, with rule of law on top of our country's minds, etc. But in fact, we still have very raw materials oriented country with a big share of oligarchs economy, etc. For example, if in Europe the share of small and medium enterprises is approximately 55 to 60% of economy of GDP. In Ukraine, we have a very different situation. Only 15% of our economy is small and medium enterprises. So we don't have enough basis for liberal economy still in Ukraine. But we made our decision. We are trying to become a liberal country with liberal economy. It is why we started a lot of changes, a lot of reforms after the Maidan in 2014. But for our economy and for our politics, the main challenge that time was Russian war. Russia started this war, not a conflict, but real war against Ukraine 8 years ago. So we are in this war 8 years ago. Only now Europe and the United States and developed world see the hard or hot stage of this war. But we lost approximately 200% of our GDP. This means more than $300 billion during these 8 years, during this war period. So for our economy, the biggest challenge is that we do not have international investments inside of Ukraine. The level of investments is very, very low, despite of we have great investors such as Horizon Capital and other funds. But the share of investments in our GDP is very low. Also, we have very open economy, which was oriented on Russia. We changed our vector of our orientation to European Union, but European Union, despite of DFTA, despite of association agreement, still has enough restrictions for Ukrainian businesses, for Ukrainian industries. So we still are trying to become fast-growing economy, but we have a lot of obstacles. And as our main obstacle and main challenge this year is a hot period of this war. In accordance with our estimation, Ukraine this year will have only 50 to 60% of GDP compared 2021. So we will lost almost half of our economy during this year. In addition, so now we have approximately $30 billion losses in Ukrainian infrastructure. First of all, in energetic infrastructure, in roads, in bridges, in railroads, in airports, etc. We lost at least 5 airports in Ukraine. In addition, we have approximately 75% of enterprises, small, medium, and big enterprises, which now completely stopped their work. 75% of Ukrainian enterprises now do not work at all. I'm sure that most of them will restart their work in a few weeks after the war, after their winning this war. But now we have a lot of refugees, more than 2 million refugees. We have a lot of businesses which spend their resources, their reserves in order to help army. So they spend their resources, and they now do not have enough resources to restart the business. The last point is that Ukraine will need approximately $300 billion, not only in order to recover the economy, but to modernize and to restart Ukrainian economy after the war. And the main issue for us now is to establish this recovery fund or modernization fund for Ukraine, to fill this fund with the help of our partners, and for sure with resources taken, contributions taken from Russian Federation. Thank you.
So that's really interesting. $300 billion. That's probably equal to almost exactly what the foreign reserves are that Russia has. That's been frozen by Western banks or Western governments.
They have much more. They have approximately $600 billion. So we will have enough money if our partners will help us to take this contribution and reparations.
Yeah. And I think just now, America, the United States, approved a $14 billion aid package to Ukraine for the conflict.
War. But better to say the real. It's like a Voldemort. We are trying to do not name this as it is. It's not a conflict. It's a war in Europe.
Yeah, invasion war. I understand. I'm not shy about using that term. And Vasil, you invest in small businesses. What is your view from the investor side and the impact you're seeing on different sectors that you see? Because your company's been investing in Ukraine since almost the beginning of the post-Soviet period, right?
Yes, we invest primarily actually in mid-size and larger companies for the Ukrainian standard. So certainly, I think it's too early to say what the impact is going to be. I think we're too early. The fog is too dense. But clearly, the situation is very challenging for many of them, especially of those focused on the domestic market. We are a little bit lucky here because lots of the companies we invested in are focused on exporting markets, especially IT companies, and those are to a lesser extent affected. But maybe elaborating in more detail on the question you gave is, I think Ukraine entered this war in a very strong shape. I think it's important that everybody understands. All the key exporting items of the country, which is metals, mining, commodities, agri-commodities, and IT, which are the main export sectors for Ukraine, they all have been booming, and they all were fetching, the highest prices on record, at least recent history. So as a result, Ukraine entered 2022 with record foreign exchange reserves, over $30 billion. Quite a robust economic growth given the, say, not super attractive demographic pyramid. Most of the structural reforms done over the last, 8 years, and it was becoming actually an attractive country that was attracting the attention of the foreign investors that have been missing for many years. Exactly as Andriy was saying. But it was starting actually to become, hot again. And I think that was one of the main issues that Russia had, because Russia wouldn't allow a successful Ukraine and a prosperous Ukraine. And if you're comparing, I'll just give you a few numbers. So already in 2020, even with the effect of the pandemic, Ukraine came back to the pre-2014 level of GDP per capita, right? So we were just north of $4,000 GDP per capita in 2014. Then there was in 2013, then there was a collapse to like just above $2,000, GDP per capita in nominal terms here. I'm talking, after the 14-15 war, and now we were back at just over 4,000. Russia, in contrast, and that's few people realize it, Russia was at just north of $15,000 GDP per capita in 2013. And at the end of 2020, they were at $10,000. So you understand that Russian economy was in a terrible shape already. So the growth was minimal. The vibrancy from the economy was gone. The only thing kind of keeping them more or less in okay shape were the high energy prices. But it was a troubled, sick man. And I think this war was a way to divert the attention from the sluggish, non-existent economic growth, the decreasing living standards in Russia. And I think the idea was of this, again, I don't want to play kind of the military or political strategies because that's not what I'm good at, but the idea was of a kind of a quick war that they can win and boost a little bit the spirits of the people. Because otherwise, economically, they were already in relatively dire shape.
Mm-hmm. Andrei, what do you think about the Russian economy? And Vasil brought up the declining living standards, but a lot of economists thought, or a lot of analysts thought, that going into the war, that although Russia had suffered decline in real GDP and living standards, they had built up an economic war chest that was going to protect them from the war. Did you believe that was also the case before the war? Did you think Russia would be protected? And what has actually happened?
No, Russia wasn't ready for such level of sanctions, for such a stupid war, because of the very high level of corruption, because of they are losing support of their traditional partners, even their closest partners like Kazakhstan. And now I hope China will dramatically change their politics concerning trade and support of Russia. So what we see, first of all, Russia try to be prepared for sanctions by changing their reserves, transferring them from euro and first of all from dollar to yuan and the gold, but it was not enough. Not enough because they forget that they are still very import-dependent country, import-dependent economy in any spheres. I'm sure that Russian economists and prime minister and ministers reported to President Putin that they are ready, that they replaced import sources, import parts for their weapon production with local producers. But that was not true. They still depend on Germany, Slovak and Czech Republic, partially on Taiwan and Japan and the United States, with a wide range of equipment. Without these supplies, they cannot develop their oil industry, gas industry, manufacturing, and other industries. So Russia now is not ready for this level of sanctions. As for people and living standards, for sure they will lose. Now we see that Russia came back to 2001, 2002, means 20 years back in living standards, but they will continue this way back during next weeks. Then for sure they will face losses more than 20% of their GDP this year. But the biggest issue for them, they will lose their reserves, most of them. And I'm sure that nearest days we will see that Russia cannot pay their debts. Now we see that Russian companies, state companies like Rosneft and then Sberbank had to ask their investors to wait with their payments. So we have a kind of technical default. Then what else is that Russia cannot replace their exports with China or other countries. First of all, I mean, gas and oil embargo started from United Kingdom and US, and now we see that Europe is also ready, European Union also ready to announce this sanctions embargo. Some of countries, first of all, Germany, will depend on Russian gas during next few years, but they will work on the complete replacing Russia as supplier with Qatar and the United States, Norway, and other sources for gas. Maybe Ukraine will have a chance to become an exporter of gas, because Ukraine actually has the biggest gas potential in Europe. Despite of Russia, besides of Russia. So Russia is facing, as a country, is facing a big challenge now with this embargo and other sanctions. But there are two very important issues. First issue is that it seems United States think that it's enough. I mean, they will not improve the sanctions to Russia. It will be a very big mistake. President Obama made this mistake with Crimea in 2014. United States and Europe and the other developed countries of the developed world should every day or every week announce new level of sanctions to Russia. Not give them to think that it's a plateau and to fix the situation for them. Second issue is that India or United Emirates and some other countries help Russian companies and Russia as a country to have a kind of gray ways to have a covering of the sanctions. So I'm absolutely sure that China will change their politics in this sphere, and we saw that some Chinese banks stopped to collaborate or invest in Russian industries. And I hope that India and Middle East countries will join unity of the developed countries. And then the last issue is the horizontal sanctions introduced by more than 200 of global companies for Russia. They stopped their export to Russia. They stopped investments. They closed their offices. Some of them, approximately half of these companies, think that they will come back in 3 months or 6 months, but so some of them changed brands and continue to work there in Russia. But I hope that in few days we will change their minds and help them to make this decision to move from Russia completely. This means that every citizen of Russia will face the problem in nearest days. This means that every citizen of Russia will press on their local authorities and federal authorities to stop war, to change completely their politics. So world shouldn't stop the sanctions and approving of sanctions every day.
Andrei, are you surprised at the, well, actually, Vasil, I'll ask you first. Are you surprised that companies have pulled out unilaterally without the government forcing them to? I mean, it's been, I think, since Stalin's days that there was no Pepsi or Coca-Cola in Russia. I mean, this is black market, no exchange rate or no free exchange now, the ruble, black market starting to come up. This is this has knocked their economy back to the darkest days of Stalin in terms of economic conditions.
Yeah, I do have to say I was surprised in a positive way. So I still, thought that the business would act in a somewhat cynical way, maybe condemn verbally, but then stay and focus on profits first. And in that sense, the avalanche of, say, principled decisions to leave Russia has been extraordinary news, I think, for Ukraine. And I have to say it was unexpected for me in a positive way. I think where we benefit here is that there's this ESG trend, you may know, like environmental, social, and governance. So there's a strong ESG trend. I think the people running large asset managers now, they care about what they invest in, and they care about the way their capital is used. And I think the businesses figured that if they don't pull out, the backlash from investors and from consumers, but both investors and consumers, is going to be too strong. And Russia became too toxic a name. I cannot think of as toxic as brand as Russia is today. I don't think even Iraq, pre-2000, pre-invasion, or frankly, not even North Korea is as toxic as Russia is today. Because frankly, I think we all understand that North Korea, these are like the vulnerable people who are under a absolute dictatorship of some absolute lunatic, like Kim Jong-un. And in Russia's case, I think some of this toxicity is not only related to Putin, but it's actually related also to the people of Russia. And I do tend to blame many of them, if not the majority of them, for supporting the choices they're making. And in that sense, I think the toxicity is absolute, because again, it's not only against Kremlin. I feel it's actually against the country as a whole. And I feel sorry for, say, the few progressive left, the few kind of open minds left in the country, because I do believe that there must be, I don't know, like the 10 to 20% of people who think differently and maybe have a different set of values. But it's clear still that it feels that the majority are just supporting this criminal policy, and they have to pay the price.
Yeah. Andrei, how do you feel about the Russian? I know this is very hard for a lot of people in Ukraine, have family in Russia, and vice versa. A lot of Russians have family in Ukraine. What do you feel about the Russian brand, as Vasil was talking about, and the fault of the leadership versus the people?
First of all, as a futurologist, I was sure that Russia will start a hard war. Even more, I made several articles, wrote of them and published them, and made a special analytical paper for president that we have very big challenges from the Russia, and these challenges are not connected to rational rational motives. This war is absolutely unrational in our traditional logic, traditional sense. Maybe it's not as senseless from his, Putin's map of the world. But the main problem is not that we have a war between two Slavic nations. Actually, we wrote a lot about this, that we have 7 levels of war, 7 levels. And it's in fact, it's not a war between Ukraine and Russia. This is a war between two civilizations. One of them is represented by Ukraine, means Western civilization. We call this civilization a civilization of rods, where the main topics is trade, innovations, the rule of law, human capital, etc. And the world of borders, represented by Russia and some other Eastern countries, where the main topics our territories, resources, etc. Russia is very specific country because it's not a one country even from federation's point of view. Russia is innovative cities like Moscow and partially Krasnodar or Yekaterinburg or other cities. Very historical and not fast-moving cities like Nizhny or St. Petersburg. A lot of territories with a very low level of development. And a big part, in fact, territory of Chinese interests. In addition, a lot of republic which budgets covered by federal budget like Chechnya or Tatarstan. Tatarstan is not a typical example, but also the very interesting territory. But so we have a lot of interests inside of this huge country. But during last 20 years, the very warm situation on the global markets for Russian economy make authorities in this country very rich and gave them big instruments, very effective instruments to influence on citizens of Russia. So in fact we have zombie nation which do not understand what is going on and even obtaining information from internet. They compare this information with information from TV and prefer information from TV, where Russia is winner, big, very successful country, and everybody in the world think that Russia is a winning country. In addition, they still think that they have big army, a lot of nuclear missiles, etc. So they think they are too powerful to be losers in any competitions. But now they face the situation where their understanding of the world and situation in Russia should dramatically be dramatically changed. But who will change their minds? They do not have the real oppositions inside of Russia. They do not have the real channels to get true information. They obtain another truth from TV sets. In addition, only 15% of Russians were outside of Russia. As for Ukraine, more than 50% of Ukrainians visited Poland or other countries outside of Ukraine. So Ukrainians saw another world and understand that no one in Europe or in NATO want to attack Russia. No one. It's impossible. It's a very stupid thoughts, but Russians are sure that it's true.
Well, that's one of the things throughout Russian history is leaders tend to derive power from an external enemy because it deflects attention from internal problems, which ruling Russia has just historically been hard because of the vast distances and poor infrastructure and just the
no.
The
When you are speaking about Russia in this context, you should understand that Russia is not a subject historically. Russian Empire became an empire only 300 years ago, where Kiev Rus and Ukraine has more than 1500 years of history. We lost our independence several hundred years ago, but we still are different to Russia, and most of successful part of Russian history is connected with Ukraine, with Ukrainians. It's not just Russian history. So we should separate Soviet Union, Russian Empire, and modern Russia. It's absolutely different entities. Putin tries to restore Russian Empire, but his instruments are not suitable for this century. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference between Moscow and Kyiv tradition. Really, the split that happened after the Mongol invasion, and the way the economy and power has always been structured because of that. And yeah, Europe's always maintained connection and influence in Ukraine that wasn't prevalent in Moscow. So definitely different mindset. Yeah, I was speaking more about since Muscovy grew up in from the after the time of troubles when Europe was threatening Moscow. And I would say that we think it's crazy to invade Russia, and we wonder why they're so paranoid, but Russians have experienced that multiple times in history, 80 years ago being the last one. So their leaders are able to play on that fear and that memory, whether or not it's rational today. It certainly helps them justify what they're doing. But you're right. I mean, when is NATO really going to attack Russia? That seems to be a bit of a manufactured excuse for what's going on. So I wanted to ask you both about predictions, and first, Andre, you said something earlier, in a couple weeks when the war is over. That was very interesting because a lot of people are wondering how long this will take to end and what will be the outcome. It sounds like you believe Ukraine will emerge victorious, and it won't be that far off. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Actually, we see three scenarios. The basic scenario is the serious scenario, when developed world will stop increasing the sanctions, improving the sanctions. Ukraine will stop Russian forces on that positions we have. Russia will change their tactics from front war to terroristic attacks, destroying infrastructure, using Iskanders or other old missiles because they do not have calibers anymore. So they will use terroristic wave of the war, as we see this in now in Mariupol and other Ukrainian cities, and this war can last more than months. This is a basic scenario, and we are doing, Ukrainian government, Ukrainian president, Ukrainian forces, and our partners, actually a lot of our partners, trying to change this scenario to another one. This another one is a tactical winning of Ukraine. We should win over the Russian forces, but it's not enough, because in this second scenario, Ukraine can win only after the replacement of current authorities in Russia, first of all Putin and his close teams. So developed world should work on this topic, using sanctions, using the partnership with even Russian oligarchs and other subjects, stakeholders of this process. But we have also a third scenario, which can be connected with increasing the level of this war, using nuclear weapon, the real World War III. And this scenario is also possible, but it's very hard to realize this scenario. It's only scenario for chantage, not for real realization. But Europe and the United States, NATO countries, first of all, and Germany, first of all, should understand that there are no options of nuclear war, even if they make their decision to close war, to close sky over the Ukraine, to realize no-fly zone over Ukraine. Putin never will start nuclear war because it's impossible in current situation and current situation in Russia, inside of Russia. He cannot realize the signal even using nuclear submarines or some other instruments. So developed world should be more proactive and active in helping Ukraine with this war in order to protect the world from World War III.
So you discount the possibility of nuclear escalation because the people in Russia that are in power with Putin just won't allow it internally to happen.
Yeah, sure.
Got it. And Vasil, I don't know if you have any of your own predictions on the scenario, but if you do, you're welcome to offer them in terms of the military outcome. But if not, I'd like to ask you to move on to a post-war outlook for Ukraine and Russia as you see it, because you've been involved in this part of the world for a while. I would imagine that until 2014, Russian economy you probably worked with a lot as part of your companies. What do you see as the post-war outlook, given a long war, many months or even longer, or one that ends quickly? And how would those two scenarios be different for both sides?
Yeah, so look, for me, the fog is too dense still to make, say, any prognosis about the outcome of the war. At the same time, I do have to say I'm cautiously optimistic about things, simply because I understand this war is way too costly for all the sides that matter in this war. It's costly for Russia, and I think it's becoming risky for Russia from an economic perspective. It's one thing when you have, like progressives and liberals get on the Red Square and trying to protest. It's a different thing when you have kind of grumpy, factory workers who haven't received their salary and they go on strike, right? So it's certainly kind of extremely risky and very costly for Russia. It's costly for China, that is a big importer of energy. It's a big exporter of goods, and you can understand they're hit on all sides. So they hit on the energy side, they're hit on the exporting side, because frankly, if you're China and you're the factory to the world, and you have war in Russia, you have war in Ukraine, you have Europeans who have to tighten up their belts because the energy prices are so high, and then the consumer confidence is low. People don't buy TVs, people don't buy like gadgets, people don't buy all the stuff China is producing. So I understand, like it's all interconnected. Of course, it's negative for US too. So there's too many stakeholders that want this war to end. That's why I think that the economics will prevail, and in the end, this war will end. Now, what will this mean for Ukraine after the war? I'm optimistic for one reason, because I think Ukraine's brand, unlike the Russian brand, got just like a huge boost. Ukraine is just cool, and let's be a little bit kind of objective. I think until February 24, Ukraine was associated with kind of lots of grains, and some large country, like with some trouble and the migrants, and then the one thing maybe most of the people associate Ukraine with was Chernobyl, and that's not the best brand to have. Yes, Ukraine is about technology. Yes, Ukraine is about like so great software engineers, but I think in the broad minds of people, I think still Ukraine didn't have, say, the strongest brand. I think now Ukraine's brand, I think it's one of the coolest brands there are. When Tim Cook comes on stage and he wears a blue sweater and a yellow watch, that tells me something. When all the Hollywood stars kind of put up the Ukrainian flag, that tells me something. And maybe I'm naive and idealistic, but I do believe we live in a world where brands values, and kind of all these like touchy-feely things, they matter a lot. So in that sense, I think Ukraine, assuming it secures the security part, has a very bright future in terms of as an exporting nation. Exports of goods, exports of services, exports of creative industries, and so on. That's one. Second, I think this war will accelerate Ukraine's integration into EU. So again, the whole idea of Ukraine ever making it to EU was like terrifying to Europeans. Just like as a politician, you just couldn't sell it. Like you're like, I don't know, the Prime Minister of Belgium, and you just say like, look, we may accept Ukraine into European Union. Like the Belgians will say like, look, I don't want that. Like I want you to focus on my jobs and other things. Like, come on, we don't need the 40 million Ukrainians. Now suddenly, the tide has switched. So suddenly the Belgians, the Dutch, the Germans, Austrians, they all sympathize a big time. And the politicians, they're very kind of, they have a nose for that. So immediately they say, okay, so wait a minute, like my electorate actually is very sympathetic towards Ukraine. And I think this bid was like a real coup by Zelensky and his team, and yes, I don't believe in some fast track accession. That's not how EU bureaucracy works, but even getting the candidate status and having some realistic perspective of joining the EU in 5, 7, 10 years, I mean, that's also fantastic because, the journey is as precious as being a member because you already get access to structural funds, the investor come in the anticipation that you'll be part of the European Union and so on. So that's the second thing. So first is the brand. Second is like the real perspective of joining the EU, and third, look, that's my hope actually, because one concern I have about this war from an economic perspective is that lots of people left, like over 2 million refugees left, and of course, typically these are the more mobile ones, the more cosmopolitan ones, the ones who could afford it, the more active ones, and that's basically I don't want to come across as elitist, but many of them are the ones that make Ukraine tick, that make the Ukrainian economy tick, and of course it would be a huge waste to if some of these people won't come back, and it's very important to get them back. It's very important to get these people back, but also I think Ukraine has to actually, like in Aikido, just use the weight of the opponent kind of to strike back. I think Ukraine should offer itself as a realistic destination for all the bright minds, the progressive minds of Russia, who don't see themselves living in that country, and just say like, look, come, we'll give you citizenship, like we'll do all the KYC just to make sure we don't get KGB agents in here, but like we want you, because I'm sure there's like millions of Russians who just don't associate themselves anymore with that country, and they still, I think they would appreciate living in Kyiv and Odessa, Kharkiv, and all the cool Ukrainian cities, because Ukraine is like Ukraine is cool and Russia is just like a muddy, totally uncool place right now, and we have to fight for those people, and if we can get like 500,000, 1 million of kind of bright, talented Russians, that would be a big coup after this war.
So a couple thoughts on that. I just got a call from the Borderlands Foundation. We just literally incorporated our nonprofit today in the United States. We just also submitted our European Union one under Polish law. So we're in process of both. Just off of this show in 12 days, without any ad budget or anything, someone's reached out, and I won't say which corporation it is, but they say, look, we want to say that when you make a purchase, you're going to donate to Ukraine, and we're looking for nonprofits that are going to benefit Ukraine during this conflict. Then they asked us, what are you doing? And I told them the story. Hey, we're very new. We're just incorporating. We've raised $65,000 so far on GoFundMe, which we post below every one of these shows, and they're considering, and I don't know if it's going to happen, but they're considering us as one of the nonprofits they sponsor. Things are moving incredibly fast, and this company sees that as a competitive advantage. They're getting out of Russia. That's what brands are doing, and they're making a statement saying, would you like to donate to Ukraine with your purchase? Which I just find that to be incredibly indicative of what you're talking about with the Ukraine brand. It is, and for me, Vasil, I know you're also an expat living in Ukraine from another country like me, and we were there way before anyone thought it was cool to be there, right? And now it just really warms my heart that my adopted country, where I want to raise my family, with my fiance, is now the place where I think not only Russians are going to want to go, I think Europeans will after this conflict. I think that there's a tremendous excitement about the next Marshall Plan in a country that everyone's seen, the incredible bravery. And I'll tell you, when I knew that Ukraine was going to win this war was day 3, and I posted on my Facebook wall when Zelensky said, "Send me ammunition, I need ammunition, not a ride." That won the war. And the ending was written. Now it's just a question of how long is this plot going to take? And that's really the interesting part here. And I know so many people, 40,000 foreigners who've signed up to fight in the International Legion. Where do you think they're going to settle after this war? They're not going to go back home. I know some of the guys who want to come fight, and they're ex-US Army soldiers, and they miss living on the edge, and Ukraine's the place they're going to get that thrill of adventure again, and it's going to be the place they're going to call home afterwards. When you go through something this intense, you have 100,000 plus Ukrainian men returning from abroad to volunteer. You have men paying bribes to get into the army, and even bribes to get into the territorial defense. And then in Russia, you have conscripts complaining to their mothers on the phone that they were tricked into going into combat, Putin trying to deny it, and now they're trying to conscript more people out of university by kicking people out for minor infractions and saying, "Oh, by the way, you have to go join the army," a hidden conscription. So if you look at just from a pure morale perspective, like how do Russians feel about their own brand? Are you willing to die for your country? And then Ukraine, I think you nailed it in terms of the brand. And brand is hard, it's frustrating as a marketer because you can't measure it, but you can. And I think that's really the outcome of the war will be determined by that.
Thank you.
Well, Andrei, what are your thoughts on the future for Russia and Ukraine after the war?
Ukraine, for sure, I'm 100% sure that Ukraine will have a kind of Marshall recovery plan, but we do not need just a Marshall recovery plan. We need a plan for total modernization of our country because we are ready. Now we have a nation with 90+% of support of our future development, of our president, of our independence, of our collaboration and quick joining to NATO or EU institutions. It's very high level of the support for modernization of Ukraine. For sure, we will start developing modern infrastructure here. We will become a country, the best country for doing business, for innovations, for IT technologies and digital products. By the way, I didn't mention this, but Ukraine actually has 20% of world market of games development, digital games development. We have approximately 30% of fintech market for the IT sector. Development, IT development. Also, the same with artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, etc. So we have great potential to become not only raw materials country, in metals, in agriculture, and even in IT sector, where we sell only hours of programmers, not the final products. And Vasil, by the way, invests, his fund invests in product companies, first of all. So we will be the most developed IT or digital country in the world in the future decade. Then for sure we will be a center of international trade and logistics between Europe and Asia, Northern Europe and Middle Asia, etc., Middle East. then for sure Ukraine will be a responsible country for democratization of Russia after the war, because we need this one of the biggest challenge for the developed world, what to do with Russia after the Ukrainian or developed world win over the Putin's Russia. So what will Russia do? One scenario, basic scenario, means that Russia will be separated or divided into 5 to 7 different countries, and to become a territory of interests of China, of some Asia countries and European countries, and the European part of Russia as one of these parts. But I think that developed world will do their best to do not have 7 nuclear countries instead of 1. So we will find a way how to help progressive Russians to keep country in hands to realize quick modernization of Russia, and to help Russia to back to world markets in nearest future, in nearest years, but only after their total modernization of the democratization of Russia. So we are ready to realize this way, to help Russians to understand that nobody in the world do not want to destroy Russia as a country. In fact, now emotionally, for sure, we would like to destroy Kremlin and whole Russia with including their industries, but never Ukraine being aggressive country or aggressive people. We prefer to develop it our world, our territory, our country, not to destroy other countries. So in fact, it's enough for Ukraine to win over Russia in this world, to have contributions and reparations in order to modernize Ukraine, and then to help Russia to become reliable partner, reliable neighbor for Ukrainian future.
Well, what's interesting that I think that both of you brought up here was this idea that Ukraine can actually become a catalyst for modernizing Russia, and this goes all the way back to the old days when Ukraine was the place that Russian peasants would run away from their masters to escape servitude and come back to Ukraine where you were free, and create a new future. It's a lot like the American West, where you would go out somewhere to create a new life, and no one would know who you are. And I think Ukraine can provide that wonderful opportunity for Russians, Belarusians to start again. And actually, there's some great signs coming out of Belarus too. Where is their army? Still hasn't come down, and they're certainly needed. Kazakhstan, same thing, and now it's rumored Putin's even trying to recruit from Syria, which would be interesting to see his foreign fighters that he's able to recruit versus the ones that Ukraine's able to recruit from 54 different countries. So, yeah, I really like that going back to the future of Ukraine spurring economic and political revitalization in Russia. Maybe not 7 different countries, but I'm sure China wouldn't mind taking everything up to the Ural Mountains, and Ukraine could just become Kiev and Rus again.
Don't forget Japan and some native parts of Japanese empire.
Yeah, I'm sure we could just do Kiev and Rus, give everything else to China and Mongolia and Japan, and see what happens. But yeah, you're right. The nuclear weapons probably make that plan not so easy to do. It's amazing what those weapons do and allow President Putin to do right now, because the only thing really stopping the country from being extremely vulnerable on all sides to China, to Finland, Sweden, Poland. The entire Russian army, 75% of its combat power right now is fully committed inside Ukraine and not doing so well in terms of losses, equipment breakdowns. They do need to watch, and I do think that you're right, Andrei. Michael Kaufman, I think the best Russian military analyst out there, said the other day on a podcast, he said the Putin regime's days are numbered. And he, for the first time in 22 years of observing him and his grip on power, I see it slipping. And I do think that that is a very real concern, that, you know, who's going to put down the next revolt in Dagestan? Who's going to put down the next Chechen uprising? You know, these become very real and not just economic pressing concerns with workers across the country, lower middle class families potentially becoming security concerns, but real fighting that has been suppressed in other parts of the countries, let alone foreign armies that may try to test something. The only thing that stops that is nuclear weapons. Well, Vasyl, Andrei, I'm going to end like I always do with a quick review of the best from Twitter, and I like to do this, and I'd love both of your comments if I show something that you want to comment on, because I respect both of your perspectives immensely. So I'll just let me know if everyone can see my screen here. And President Zelensky, again, inspiring the world. This is from his address to, I think, to the British Parliament.
Yeah.
The enemy can destroy the walls of our homes, our schools, our churches, and today, sadly, hospitals, but will never reach our soul, our heart, our ability to live freely and fight boldly.
Actually, 35 hospitals were destroyed during this war. 35.
And over 200 schools
Yeah.
have also been destroyed. It's doesn't seem like an accident. This is a very disturbing scene from Mariupol, but we do show, with obviously some discretion, the aftermath of these attacks, just to show people what's going on. A maternity hospital, several killed and wounded women and children from this attack in Mariupol. Large aircraft bomb. It's hard to imagine the no-fly zone will not become more and more of a pressing issue among Western governments. These are just some economic news. Russia banned the purchase of cash dollars and euros. Quickly, Andrei, what are some of the impacts of the banning of foreign exchange purchases?
Not as big as we expect, but still good enough. First of all, Russians keep their storages in dollars and euros, dollars first of all, so it will help ruble to fix its position. But in fact, Russians do not need dollars, because I mentioned this, only 15% of them are traveling. So it will not be a big trouble for most of them, most of nation, but it will be a very big trouble for elites. For elites, for business, for local authorities, etc. So these elites, it's an our target. We need to make them more active now on replacing Putin with another person or another group of person. So it will help us. As for business, it would be a great problem, but business now stopped their imports anyways. So most of Russian companies will stop transferring their dollars to Russia, and they will keep their export earnings outside of Russia using different channels like in India, like Arabic countries, etc. So I'm sure that we need to improve financial sanctions. What should we do? First of all, to include most of banks, all Russian banks in this list of sanctions connected with SWIFT and other kind of sanctions. We need to convince MasterCard to completely stop supporting cards inside of Russia.
I think MasterCard, Visa, and American Express have stopped supporting that, haven't they?
Visa completely stopped. MasterCard partially stopped. So we need to continue our work on this direction. Also, we need to press on the international institutions to stop operating with Russian debts or with Russian resources in the banks outside of Russia, etc., etc., etc. We need to completely stop Russian economy, not just to make them a bit in troubles.
You can also see the brands that are pulling out, over 200 of them. Rolex, I think, and Victoria's Secret are probably going to be the most upsetting for the elites.
Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Unilever could be a bigger problem for
workers.
Russians.
Yeah,
because you see, such sanctions, better to say, such companies as luxury companies, they will press on elites, local authorities, but in not in a short period of time, in a long enough period of time. They have enough Balenciaga in their shelves. So we need to press on that points which are using every days. Means restaurants, means the banking system, means insurance system, means food markets like metro, for example, because metro is still in Russia. IKEA stopped their work, but metro and some other Germany companies are still there. So we need to continue horizontal sanctions improving.
Well, it seems like the pressure's building, and there's a domino effect. Any brand that seems to stay in Russia right now will lose to their competition, which is a huge shift. And I think speaks to what Vasil said in terms of corporate responsibility in the West.
In fact, for such companies as McDonald's or McDonald's, Russian market is not more than 2% of their market in a global point of view. So they easily can stop their work in the Russian market. But instead of this, they are looking for a way how to avoid the sanctions, how to remain on the Russian market. So we are working to make this very reputationally bad for such brands.
Apparently, President Zelensky has now survived more than 10 attempts on his life, and this goes back to the brand of Ukraine and specifically the president, who I think is mainly responsible for the brand of Ukraine, staying in a dangerous situation in the capital versus leaving. And the the mother of the 7-year-old daughter with professional boxer Vladimir Klitschko started a relief fund for those fighting to defend Ukraine. There's a lot of celebrities and famous people across the West are getting in on the support. Massive amounts of pledges from Leonardo DiCaprio and others are coming in. And Odessa, as always, has the spirits that it's always had. And one of the interesting things, there's a rumor that one of the reasons the Russians haven't landed yet in Odessa is the Marines are refusing to assault the city. I hope that's true, but that may change.
Most of them are from Crimea, so
Yeah.
they are afraid of being in Odessa.
That famous Odessa easy mood, even in the times like this. They're protecting the Cardinal Richelieu statue here. They're protecting their cultural landmarks, and this is what's going on in Kherson today. The liberation the Russians were expecting is not going as planned. There's apparently 400 civilians in Kherson that were detained by Russian Rosgvardia troops. So signs of unrest being met with ever increasing retaliatory measures. Bad news for Russia. Out of the 54 plus countries that are sending people or volunteers from 54 plus countries, apparently the best sniper in the world is on his way with quite a track record from Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq, with the world's longest known kill. And just from experience in the Army, a great sniper can definitely cause havoc across the front lines. So Belarusian legionnaires are joining to fight in Ukraine. So Belarusian army has not made it down, but that hasn't stopped a lot of people from Belarus to come fight on behalf of Ukraine.
Так, у нас тут бригада білорусів, значить, які воюють проти російських окупантів. От їхній командир. Скажіть, будь ласка, скільки у вас білорусів підпорядкування? Чоловік 60, так? Всі готові? Підготовку ви ж пройшли? Все готовы убивать русских, белорусов, которые придут на...
Sorry, we didn't have English translations. Andre, what roughly were they saying there?
They said that they are ready to kill Russians. Their troop consists of Belarusians who are ready to protect Ukraine against Russians. They are trained and ready.
So this goes to the economic partnership that China and Russia declared before this conflict started. And this, let's call it partnership, is not going well for the Chinese leadership. They're unsettled by what they're seeing in Ukraine. They did not anticipate the significant difficulties the Russians were going to run into. And this also gives them pause related to their own ambitions towards Taiwan, which is another small but very independent and democratic.
Not as small. It's big. It's small compared to China, maybe, but it's approximately 70 million people. And big.
Yeah, it's not small from the perspective of the economy and the size of the population, but and protected by a body of water, which is not insignificant. Timothy Ash, one of the top Russian economist in the West from Ireland said Russia's an emerging markets basket case: default, devaluation, closed and collapsed financial markets, no trade, ESG black marked with companies closing shop as quickly as they can, banana republic, tin pot dictatorship, fascist state. That is the sad reality. Again, going all the way back to the days of Stalin in terms of the level of restrictions and isolation that the Russian economy is now facing just 2 weeks into this conflict.
Yeah.
So wait, you can't see the screen that I'm sharing?
No, I do not see.
I cannot see it.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's, I wish Katya would have told me that sooner. So you can you see it now?
No,
That's
but
strange.
you can describe.
No, I'm, hold on. I have to, this is the slideshow that my show producer put together. So, you guys can see that now?
No, unfortunately.
Strange. Okay, well, I did not get permission apparently from myself for the slides. I'm sorry about that. Okay, well, we have this presentation. I'll probably just have to figure out how to share it in the future because somehow my permissions on this show are not allowing me to. Well, I'll just actually I'm going to attach this to the bottom of the presentation, and I'll quickly talk through it because these are just highlights that are important, even though we can't show it, and maybe we can edit that in later. Finally, there was Russian MOD's Zveda allegedly showing Russian troops in Ukraine. I can't show that. There's a joke here about the CIA releasing a photo of the so-called Ghost of Moscow, who took down Russian economy in 1 week with President Vladimir Putin in the cockpit of a plane. And Russia will not use conscript soldiers in Ukraine, according to President Putin. And he also claimed there will be no additional call-up reservists and that professionals are fulfilling their fixed objectives were leading the war. And then today, Russian armed forces admitted that conscripts had accidentally been sent to Ukraine and that was being fixed, that they were being sent back. And one of the jokes on social media was as prisoners of war or as coffins, which was a little bit of dark humor there. 7 years ago today, Boris Nemtsov, the most popular of Russian opposition leaders, was gunned down on a Moscow bridge the day before he was to lead a march for peace, protesting the first war in Ukraine. So this was the original invasion, was being protested by one of President Putin's leading opponents who was against the war. And then finally, I wish I could show it because it's translated, but I can't. I have a video that I'm going to post a link to below this, which was on Twitter, which has some very disturbing conversations that were intercepted by. Actually, I'll play it for those of you who understand Russian. But these are conversations of Russian troops that were intercepted by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. And they're very disturbing. Again, I will try and edit this into the video later, post a link to it, because if you don't speak, you just have to read the subtitles.
Куда ездил?
Пробились, ездил.
Ходили маленько по бараберничали, блядь. Нихуя надо, не маленько, а по полной, блядь.
Я машину расстрелял.
Ты?
Да.
А хули делать? Стреляй на срань, блядь, чтобы не в тебя ебать их урод, блядь, теперь. Считаешь, что наркоманы и нацисты ебаные. Это куда?
Мародерить. Коттеджный поселок Верховной Рады.
Так.
Теперь у тебя есть 2 норковых манто.
Ёпта.
У Даши есть этот самый мутоновый полушубок с песком.
Дом один взяли.
Как твой контроль? У нас, блядь, 20 человек в одном доме живет.
А я спил за 7 тысяч, нахуй. Кока-колы не будет?
Не будет.
Охуеть, ебать. Ну ладно, привезу хотя бы телек за 70 тысяч.
Он большой?
Да.
А вам разрешат его вообще нести?
Да.
Почему вам это разрешают?
Потому что они сами это набрали.
А еще у меня есть метабовский станок, о котором я мечтал давно, длинный.
Родной мой.
И 2 ямаховские колонки, как у Никитина, каждая, которая по 100 тысяч стоит. Сварочник новый в ящике, там, мясорубка на дачу новая. Блин.
Это только ты собрал все это?
Ну, мы с князем ездили вчера вдвоем.
Вчера у нас вот тоже, короче, просто какие-то 3 типа вышли прям на нас. Мы их держали, раздели догола, смотрели всю одежду. Ну и потом принимаете решение, отпускать их или нет, потому что если их отпустить, они могут наши позиции сдать. И тогда нас всех порешает артиллерия. Всех. Ну и приняли решение просто в лесу застрелить.
Сереж, чтобы потом не говорили, что ты там это...
Это, ну, это еще я блендер взял на 500 ватт.
Ого, это мне надо.
Я говорю, то, что я живу, это я не знаю, мы выиграли билет один из 100 тысяч.
So some very, very disturbing conversations intercepted by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense describing looting, war crimes, rape, murder by Russian soldiers, and not only the economic impact, but real crimes against Ukrainian people is really disturbing. And I'll post a link to this video for those of you watching in English, so you can see in the comments the slides that you missed. I'll just put screenshots of all of them. And just to bring that back home in terms of what the struggle is really all about. This is not just an economic struggle, but it's much more than that. And the discipline of the Russian troops, or the lack thereof, and the way they're treating the population is just going to continue to ruin their brand, as you said, their economy, because every time these type of things happen, international outrage grows, which leads to more sanctions, which leads to more boycotts, which leads to greater pain for the Russian people. And frankly, listening to that, you're right. They do deserve that. And it's sad that it's come to that, but this is what happens in war. So thank you, Andre, for joining us. It was great to meet you. I've heard a lot of great stuff about your work, and I'm looking forward to coming to your university one of these days, and hopefully getting to hear one of your lectures and maybe give some guest class on something.
That'd be great.
Trying to be helpful to you, and Vasil, also to you. We know each other from living in the same building, and look forward to returning to that great apartment and hanging out with you and drinking Moldovan wine, and also to helping participate with both of you in the reconstruction of Ukraine, which me and my fiance are committed to as our life's work after this conflict is hopefully over soon. And we'll meet you all back there in Kyiv.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Thank you for inviting, Sam, and thank you for everything you do. It's inspiring to see people from the other side of the world being so committed and so patriotic about Ukraine. Thank you.
It's my country now, and I definitely am going back. So I look forward to seeing you both there.
Good.
Thanks,
See you.
Andre.
Thank you.